Hello, everyone. It's Lyndon, and I want to talk a little bit about empathy and introversion because I do consider myself an introvert. I ran across an article that said something in a very passive way about empathy being you jiving with someone. Baby, jive with me. Relax your mind, take your time with me. I went all the way back to 2005 and sang you a little bit of Pretty Ricky because I found that article about jiving with someone being the same as empathy very hilarious, because I don't necessarily believe that empathy is just jiving with someone. I believe that empathy is bigger than that. And in terms of my own research, I have found there are actually three kinds of empathy. And what most people think empathy isn't even the most common form of empathy that we have for others. I've always thought that empathy was a way of understanding someone else, a way of putting yourself in someone else's shoes even. And then actually doing that in an authentic way, not just saying, oh yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from, but really genuinely believing, like being able to put yourself in their shoes for a second, feel their feelings in that moment, even if you yourself haven't been in a similar situation, or even more so if you have ever been in a similar situation. When I was researching the kinds of empathy there were, I realized that that's just a form of cognitive empathy, not necessarily emotional or compassionate empathy, which are the other two. And I've taken some notes because I really want to use the terminology that this Psychology Today article I was reading puts forth. Again, I'm going to state this again, that there are three kinds of empathy. There's cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. I found that to be fascinating because when we think of emotional, like the term emotion, I would coin it with compassionate a little bit, but it's not the same thing. And so we're going to break it down. Cognitive is basically being able to think about someone else's situation. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes in terms of a situation. But only in the brain. Only mentally are you able to do that. You're able to jive with them in terms of a mentality. Like you understand and can understand where they're coming from, but I believe that this is a very good form of empathy because you really do need to put yourself in that type of mindset in order to understand that mentality better of theirs, that their situation better. There needs to be a level of like a mental level there. But it stresses that cognitive is not a feeling. It's a mental thing. You can think about their situation and understand the situation. That's it. And then there's emotional. This is where you feel it. You have an encounter with another person that they tell you blah, 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 blah about their situation, right? There's an emotional response, right? So you're feeling it with them. And that in turn makes you have an emotional reaction. It says you can literally sense people's emotions. Now, I don't necessarily believe that you walk into a room. I don't necessarily believe that everyone can walk into a room and feel the energy of the room. Some people are just oblivious. But then there may be some that can walk into a room and read it well emotionally or cognitively. That's basically these first two are probably the most well-known forms of empathy, in my opinion. It's about reading the room well, but it's also, to me, empathy is with another person. I always thought that you could be empathetic to someone that you know better, like that you would know their reactions to things, you know their emotions already, like their quirks and things a little bit better because you know them on a deep level or even a deeper level than just say acquaintance or a stranger. But that's not true either, because when we watch Marley and Me, or when we watch a emotional movie and we have an emotional response to that scene in that movie, it's the same thing. That is having emotional empathy for that scene and that situation. Again, those, I would think that in the terms that this article is coining these, for cognitive empathy, that would be like a mindfuck movie. Those movies like Inception, where you really have to think about it. You have to, like when the ending comes, you really have to put yourself in those characters' shoes in order to fully understand the situation better. Like think of the movie Seven. If you never put yourself in Brad Pitt's character situation, you'll never cognitively empathize with that character. But you do at the end of that movie. Also, you have an emotional response to that movie because that shit is fucking sad and infuriating. So there's both at play there. But that's a complete stranger. This is a character. This is not even a person, like a real person. But this is a character that you're empathizing with. So it can be well-rounded. I think empathy can be well-rounded. But I always assumed I knew what empathy was. But I've come to realize that empathy is so much more rounded than that. The article goes on to state that there are good and bad things associated with empathy. Good, because you are actively able to understand someone, either cognitively or emotionally. And with those two forms, it's good to empathize with someone and their situation and be a better friend in that situation, even be a better acquaintance, as a way to heal parts of the situation as a listener, because basically that's all it is. It's like you listening, whether or not you have a response or not. I think the listening is the most important part there, is that you are able to listen. Now, they're not necessarily, in my experience, when someone comes to you with an intense emotion about something, either they are emotional about it or frustrated about it or whatever, whether or not you have an actual reaction, just listening can, in my opinion, can be a form of personal integrity, personal empathy that you have for humanity as a whole, I guess you could say. And then bad would look like you having no self-control. Like you are one of those that happens to be a person that if someone comes up to you and they're crying about so-and-so or such and such a situation, he did this to me, they did this to me, kind of a thing, and you always react, you have no self-control, that's not having control over your own empathy. That's where it can kind of go bad. Now, I don't like the term good or bad when we're talking about the psyche, because I believe that that every single psyche is different, but the map of the psyche may look the same for everyone, but everyone's map is different, I guess you would say. The last form of empathy that I wanted to say was compassionate empathy. Now, I would think that compassionate empathy would be some kind of a mixture between cognitive and emotional. Like, you can fully put yourself in their situation mentally, and you can fully incorporate the emotions that they bring out in you, or that they are conjuring up emotions in you to have an emotional response. But then there's a level of self-control there, so that we don't get to the bad, negative portion of empathy. But that's actually not what it is. Compassionate empathy is an actionable empathy. It is where you can be both cognitive and emotional with someone or with a situation or what have you, or a room of folks. But you're able to gauge the reactions of those people, mentally put yourself in their shoes, and then do something with it. do something about it. Not just sit there and cry with them, not just sit there and mentally be in the same situation as them, but actually do something about said empathy. Now this says, you are neither or both of the others. But you're not just an emotional blubbering mess, nor are you just mentally in a similar place in your mind's eye. You feel the emotions and then help. The situation that always comes to mind when talking about empathy is scenes in a movie, like a teenager drama movie, where the teenager are at a party that just seems to be drama ridden. If someone were to come to me at a party and found such and such cheating on them in the upstairs bedroom, you can mentally, if you've been in a similar situation, like say you've had a cheating partner before, you can mentally grab onto that same situation, right? Just standing there. If they come to you as a blubbering mess, what am I supposed to do? You know, I love them so much, blah, 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 blah. And they're just blubbering. And you blubber with them. Neither one of you are doing anything about this. In my case, I would walk up the stairs and beat the shit out of this person. Now, I don't want to condone violence, but I tend to hold grudges. I would beat the shit out of them. For this person. For a past of mine, in order to fight for me, for this person. Does that make sense? Anyway, I don't want to condone violence, but it could just be confronting that person, with that friend. I'll keep saying friend. It doesn't have to be a friend. But if they come to you feeling certain ways and you are empathetic with them, then in terms of being a compassionate empathetic, then you can go with them to confront this person as like moral support. That's compassionate empathy. I wanted to give a little bit of a background on me. As an introvert, doing internal work and healing on myself in terms of pathworking the psyche, I've learned some things about my own introversion, but also some things about extroversion. How in terms of extroversion, I always felt like just because they project outwards, it meant that I put them on a pedestal almost because I wasn't feeling right with my introversion. I had put extroverts on a pedestal like they were better. You know, they're going to go somewhere in life. They're going to get the CEO position. You know, they have more of a chance of climbing ladders in corporate America than, you know, being an introvert. Just because they're extrovert and they project outwards in a situation in a group of people and they read people better doesn't necessarily mean that they don't feel or that they don't know how to introspect. It doesn't mean that. And I had to learn that through my own healing with my own introversion. Now, there was something else in another article about these three aspects of empathy in terms of extro and introversion. And I want to read it. Extroverts use cognitive more than emotional, and vice versa for introverts. So therefore, introverts would use emotion more in terms of empathy. So extroverts projecting outwards, needing that as fuel in terms of personality and in terms of their relationships, projecting outwards and needing that, they would use their cognitive empathy. And that's why they make great CEOs, to be honest with you, because they can empathize cognitively, but they can control themselves emotionally. They can stop themselves from having a huge emotional response. But then introverts use emotional empathy. They feel, right? They don't necessarily even have to think about the situation to feel for that person, to feel the situation. It's like, oh, that would be horrible. I'm so sorry, blah, 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 whatever. Just giving forth an example here. And they don't have to be present cognitively in that situation with that other person to empathize with them. It's more emotional. because of their own introspection. Neither is better. Neither is more so on a pedestal than the other. Extroverts may be able to read a room better cognitively, and introverts can feel the room's energy, can feel the room emotionally. They both have roles in society. I read this on a forum about this topic that I wanted to read because, to be honest with you, I was having some emotional response to it. I have met introverts who were cold-hearted as witches and extroverts who are complete softies. Please don't coin the term witch anymore with being cold-hearted. That is a societal term that we have put forth on the crone/hag/witch that has nothing to do with the craft whatsoever. So I got a little heated there, but witches aren't cold-hearted. Just because you've met a softie that's an extrovert doesn't mean that there aren't some hard-ass extroverts. And just because you've met some cold-hearted witch introverts doesn't mean that those witches couldn't potentially cognitively understand a situation. So I just did not like the fact that they use the term witch. Like, how outdated do you have to be? As a witch, I take offense to that. One thing I learned about extro and introversion was the only difference between the two is how they react in terms of a situation and then how they refuel afterwards. I read that in another blog, that they're, in terms of refueling for their own selves, there's a difference in extroversion and introversion. There's a difference in how they refuel. Like, introverts need more alone time. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be alone all the time. It just means that when they go to a party and it starts to take a toll on them in their psyche, they need an alone time afterwards. That's it. As an introvert, I become overstimulated after a party or at a party. And I need to go alone and regroup. I believe, at least in my opinion, that introverts or extroverts can be empathetic. I believe that either one can be and are. I believe everyone to an extent is empathetic. Like a sociopath or a psychopath, those terms are coined by, I believe those terms are coined by psychologists of people that do not have empathy. I believe that, to end this chat, I wanted to just say that, to me, empathy is just about how people absorb emotions and absorb situations mentally. That's the only difference. And then knowing whether or not you'll react in those situations. What situations would you react to? That's how you can gauge your own interpretation, gauge your own level of empathy within yourself. Gauge which reactions you would be more cognitive with, more emotional with, or more compassionate with. I think that all three hold such understanding, to, put the pun out there. I think that it's important for us to find ways to move our energy around to keep it from getting stagnant. So if we're being cognitive or emotional or compassionate, we need to find ways within ourselves to refuel in what way is best for us and best for our psyche. Don't allow the emotions and those situations to fester. I believe that getting them out either on paper or in a meditative state or an active imagination, find ways to keep the energy flowing in order to keep your fuel level up. And therefore, we will be better prepared to handle any situation. Is to know yourself and to know where your levels of empathy are. Explore ways to manage your empathy, whatever it is, whichever one it is. Maybe you have 2 out of the 3. I think researching healing, self-healing, how to self-counsel the self, if that's even something that you can do alone. I don't necessarily think that everyone can or should. If you explore the self in the best possible way for you and then still need professional help, that's perfectly okay. I believe that you need to be 100. I love that quote by Barbara Bush. It's like, everyone has something to give. It can be blood, it can be time, it can be money, but everyone has something to give. I'm paraphrasing, of course. I don't know what the hell the actual quote is, but I may leave it below in the description. But anyway, I just wanted to chat about introversion, a little bit about my introversion, and how I have kind of researched the term introversion, and then, of course, mirrored by extroversion, and what those 2 terms mean in regards to empathy and my thoughts on all that. So let me know in the comments below what you think of empathy or introversion or extroversion, and how you think that they all kind of play roles with each other. And I love to talk about these things. I'm very passionate about this. So if you have something to add or correct me about, please leave it in the comments. And I hope to see everyone again on the channel. Much love.